Reese, a teenager, finds herself trapped in a small room filled with telephones. Suddenly, one of the phones, marked with a small note, starts ringing. Instinctively, she picks up the phone, and a recorded voice congratulates her, saying, "You have received a royal flush." As she tries to make sense of what's happening, all the phones in the room start ringing, delivering the same message. Suddenly, water begins pouring out from the phones, quickly flooding the room. Looking up, Reese notices a toilet attached to the wall. Realizing the significance of the message, she understands that she must flush the toilet. She starts climbing the wall using the phones as footholds. However, when she reaches the top, she discovers that the toilet handle is missing. Staying calm, she recalls the earlier note. An idea forms in her mind. She dives back down and uses one of the phones to dial the number from the note. To her relief, the plan works, as the phone then reveals the missing toilet handle. She climbs back up and flushes the toilet, causing the water to recede. It is then revealed that everything was just a virtual reality game, and Reese is actually at an esports center, surrounded by other professional players. Back home, Reese shares dinner with her father, Chris. They are very close, living together after the passing of Reese's mother. Suddenly, the lights begin to flicker, and the room experiences a power surge. It turns out that the entire city is experiencing a blackout due to the power surge. All electronic devices connected to the power supply explode, leaving the city in complete darkness. Reese, however, doesn't take it as a typical power outage, as even the phones are cut off from the outside world, leaving them with no information about the blackout. Fortunately, her iPad is still functioning, as it wasn't charging at the time. They use it to look at old photos of her mother together. In the middle of the night, Reese hears a strange noise coming from her father's workshop. She gets up, grabs a flashlight, and enters the workshop. There, she finds a book titled Radio Flash. It turns out that this room used to be her grandfather Frank's workshop, who had moved to the mountains years ago. Reese uncovers a dusty sheet covering a table and finds her grandfather's old radio communication equipment. Though neglected for years, Reese tries to repair the radio, hoping to connect with her grandfather. Her efforts pay off, as she manages to repair the radio and reach her grandfather. Frank, aware of the blackout, considers it a mysterious consequence of a radio flash explosion. He leaves a message for Reese to contact him again the next day, suggesting that they should evacuate to the mountains where he lives before the situation worsens, as no one knows how long the blackout will last. Before ending the call, he also gives Reese instructions on how to reach his location. The next morning, Reese informs her father about the news from her grandfather. Chris is initially reluctant to leave for the mountains, thinking Frank is crazy, but his daughter insists. Finally, he agrees to call his father. They head to the workshop, and Reese starts the radio transmission again. After that, Chris and Frank begin a conversation. Frank explains that the blackout is likely caused by an EMP or radio flash effect. He also warns that chaos will soon erupt in the city, as essential supplies will become scarce within 3 days. The only safe option is to join him in the mountains. Chris eventually believes him and decides to leave with his daughter. They start packing their belongings. Meanwhile, the situation outside worsens as police struggle to control the protesting citizens angry about the blackout. Chris and Reese begin their journey by car. Before leaving, they stop by the only open convenience store to buy supplies. However, witnessing the chaotic scene there, they decide to leave the area and continue their journey. Unfortunately, their progress is halted on a bridge due to an accident. A woman dies on the spot, which Reese witnesses. Meanwhile, tensions among the stranded motorists rise, and a motorcyclist crashes into a car, clearing the way for them to continue. That night, Reese suddenly wakes up and realizes they have taken the wrong route, distracting Chris from the road and causing him to lose control of the car, leading to an accident that sends them into the woods. Fortunately, they survive the crash and continue their journey on foot. Noticing her father struggling to walk, Reese realizes that Chris has suffered a severe internal injury. Despite Chris's attempts to reassure her that he is fine, it's clear his condition is worsening. Before losing consciousness, he urges Reese to find help. Without wasting time, Reese runs as fast as she can and eventually finds a farmhouse owned by a man named Glenn. Glenn, unable to leave Reese to fend for herself, decides to help and brings them to his home. Sadly, it's too late for Chris, who takes his last breath. Reese is devastated, having lost the only parent she had left. That same day, Glenn helps her bury her father and offers a final farewell. The next day, Glenn decides to take Reese to her grandfather's home, beginning their journey by car. Meanwhile, Frank, worried about their safety, decides to search for them. Along the way, he discovers the crash site and finds a piece of blood-stained fabric. Following the trail they left behind, he eventually arrives at Glenn's farmhouse, but the place is deserted. Outside, he finds Chris's clothing near the grave, realizing what had happened, but there is no time to mourn. He must find Reese. Back with Glenn and Reese, their journey is interrupted by a man who asks for help. To ensure Reese's safety, Glenn hides her in the back. Unfortunately, Glenn's instincts were correct. The man kills Glenn to steal his car. Reese, who witnesses the entire event, desperately hides to avoid detection. The man drives Glenn's car to a nearby workshop intending to steal gasoline. Suddenly, a hunter arrives and shoots him. Seeing an opportunity, Reese runs away, but the hunter notices her and captures her. The man takes her to his home, where an elderly woman claims that Reese has trespassed on her property. Meanwhile, Frank finds Glenn's lifeless body lying in the middle of the road. Realizing that Glenn was the owner of the farmhouse, Frank is determined to find his granddaughter. Back at the hunter's home, the elderly woman introduces Reese to her family during dinner. The hunter is her son, Billy, and her shy grandson is named Quinn. After the introductions, Reese explains why she ended up there. She emphasizes that she can't stay long, as her grandfather must be worried. However, the elderly woman shows no sympathy, forcing Reese to stay and locking her in the attic for the night. Determined to escape, Reese waits until everyone is asleep, but the elderly woman catches her in the act and orders Billy to capture her. Unfortunately, Reese is caught and knocked unconscious. The next morning, she wakes up to find herself trapped in a sack hanging in the middle of the forest, with a bear trying to tear it open. At the critical moment, Billy arrives and shoots the bear, revealing that he used Reese as bait to catch the bear. Afterward, Reese is locked in a small room for introspection. A few days later, the elderly woman speaks to her again, trying to convince her to stay and planning to marry her off to one of her sons. Reese firmly refuses, preferring to be locked up rather than marry one of these maniacs. Furious, the woman locks her in the room again, this time tying her hands and feet as punishment. Undeterred, Reese manages to free herself from the restraints but struggles to find a way out of the room. Meanwhile, Quinn, who secretly sympathizes with her, peeks in to check on her. Reese sees an opportunity and convinces Quinn to help her escape. Tired of the abuse from his father and grandmother, Quinn agrees and helps her get out of the room. Together, they flee the house. The next morning, Billy discovers their escape and follows their trail, determined to catch them. Meanwhile, Reese and Quinn, making progress in their escape, stop to rest. Quinn searches for fruits to eat before they continue their journey. Slowly but surely, Billy catches up to them. Hearing Billy's footsteps, they resume their escape, moving as quickly as possible. However, Quinn accidentally slips and nearly falls off a cliff. Fortunately, Reese saves him, bringing them closer together. After crossing a fallen tree, Billy spots them and tries to shoot, but his shot misses. Frightened, they run and hide in a nearby lake. Realizing they can't escape, they submerge themselves in the water to stay hidden. After Billy passes by, they head in the opposite direction. However, Billy, being an experienced hunter, realizes they are behind him and resumes the chase. Knowing they can't outrun him, Quinn decides to confront his father while Reese hides behind a rock. A fierce argument erupts between father and son, during which Billy's gun accidentally falls near Reese. At first, Reese hesitates to use the gun, but she musters her courage, takes aim at Billy, and fires. However, it is revealed that Frank was the one who shot Billy, saving their lives. He found them by tracking the sound of Billy's gunshots. Relieved, Reese runs to her grandfather and embraces him, crying. The scene then transitions to a few years later. Reese and Quinn are living with Frank in the mountains. The world is still suffering from the effects of the radio flash, but they remain unaffected, as they have everything they need to survive in the forest. The film ends with Quinn focused on opening Reese's laptop and reading messages from her friends discussing the imminent end of the blackout. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Because by subscribing, you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.